What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Cooper Stuff. All right, we got a little bit of a fun episode today because, as a lot of people know, my book released last week, and a lot of people online have gone absolutely apoplectic, which is a really big word that just means they've gone cray-cray. People are so angry about so much stuff that they know so little about. It's kind of an amazing thing. So what we're going to do today is have a little fun, and I'm really thrilled that this guest came on the show because his videos have made me just absolutely crack up. And so I'm sure they're going to make you laugh. So you'll probably be excited to have him here. So we have JP Sears, comedian, now author, on the show. JP, how's it going?
John, it's going pretty good. Also, in my accolades, want you to know, I identify as the world's leading scientist. So, I'm also science. And my science-ness is happy to be here with you, brother.
I like it. You are science. You embody it.
Yeah, that I've learned from some of my idols that you can just be the thing that you study or pretend to study. So that's what I'm trying to do.
I think that the science is already taken, though. I think that was taken by Dr. Fauci, if I remember correctly.
Well, he retired. He retired last December. So
you're right.
Someone has to step up. I know Neil deGrasse Tyson, he's doing hard to be science with some really great perspective. So, this is America. You can be what you want to be. So I'm science.
I like it. I'm assuming you saw the how do you say, Neil deGrasse Tyson and Bill Maher.
That was excellent.
Really weird to see Bill Maher go after Tyson, right? What's happening? Explain it to us, JP. What's happening?
From a warped comedian's mind, yeah. I've got my perspective. I'm just a delusional human, and I've got perspectives which I'm happy to share. I will say, I think Bill Maher is one of the more important voices of reason in America today. Reason being is he's a liberal, yet he calls out the lunacy, like the radical leftist lunacy. And it's one thing for a conservative to call out the radical leftist lunacy. We need that. But it's another thing like when someone's calling out his own team. There's just something a little more credible about that. It gets more people's attention. So yeah, I watched the clip. And by the way, listeners, if you haven't seen it, just type in on YouTube Bill Maher and Neil deGrasse Tyson. And Neil deGrasse Tyson is someone, from my perspective, he's gotten pretty woke. He's someone who's on recent interviews, he's saying, it's really ridiculous, outdated thought that there's two genders and it's more of a spectrum. Science, good science, Neil. So Bill Maher just calling him out, and it's just awesome. Here's a guy, Neil deGrasse Tyson, super high IQ, but doing some very questionable political ideologies the last few years. So it's just great having Bill Maher just call it like he sees it, not afraid of this big name, this intelligent dude. So plus, couple that with Bill Maher, he's a liberal, calling out another liberal. That's something, just like conservatives. We need to, conservatives need to call out other conservatives. We want to keep the thing pure.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that. It's really interesting. It took him a little while to come around, but you started seeing it. I can't remember when I started seeing Bill Maher do that, but I was like, oh, I agree with that. Like 2020, maybe even late 2020. 2021, you started seeing more of it, and that's really good. I kind of jumped in. I probably should have started this interview by getting you to tell people who you are in case they don't know. I think you're maybe one of those kind of people that maybe people don't know they do know you, because they've probably seen your videos on YouTube because they're absolutely hysterical, but they might not have realized, oh, it's that guy. People do. So tell us who you are and whatever you want to get started, and then we'll talk about fun stuff.
Yeah. So who I am, I'm a right-wing extremist. I'm an insurrectionist. January 6th is my love language. No, so by trade, I'm a comedian. And the mission of my comedy, the mission of my work, it really took a new direction in the spring of 2020, because that's when I really woke up to see and feel and experience how freaking precious freedom is. Everything great in life hinges on that. Personally, I had been living in a bit of a bubble of ignorance, entitlement, and taking freedom for granted as an American. But I really woke up out of that little trance I was in a few years ago. And since then, yes, I'm a comedian, but more importantly, I'm a lover of freedom. I'm a freedom fighter. I use my platform to do my best to help awaken people to the preciousness of standing for freedom, while also calling out, as I see it, lies, hypocrisy, and corruption from forces, people, and movements that are trying to erode freedom. So yeah, man, I'm a lover of freedom, and I get to do it the easy way. I've got friends and a bunch of friends who are either military or they're veterans, and I look at them like that's a real freedom fighter. Like I use words like, yeah, that's child's play. I mean, it's my calling, so I'll do it, and I'm proud of it. But it's just putting it in perspective. Like, I'm an admirer of veterans. That we can also put that on my bio as well.
Oh, I like that. Yeah, me too. There's something you just said that I can really relate to, and I don't know to what degree you may or may not mean this, but I can really relate to this. I mean, before 2020, I would have thought I liked America. I wasn't the most patriotic person in the world, but I liked America. I thought it was great. I've always respected military people. Both of my grandfathers were military, and I've always liked America. I've always been pro-America. But 2020 is when it changed for me, when I was like, oh my gosh, I never really realized this is something we could lose. And all of a sudden it was real to me. And it sounds maybe a little bit like you're saying. I'm curious, you were doing comedy before then. So would you say that there was if somebody had been following you for a while, would they notice a change in your comedy?
Oh yeah, they definitely noticed it. That's for sure. Like, freedom became a political issue in 2020, which, just like yourself, I've always loved America, been proud of it, yet it was more superficial. Like, I'm taking a lot for granted. Just like in my lifetime, it's always been easy. And we've probably all heard that saying a million times of, what is it? Weak people create hard times create strong people create good times create hard times, or weak people. The cycle continues. So we'd been in that cycle. Our generations before us, we had people living through some hard times, and that created some really strong people, which created some really easy times for us. And yeah, I started having that crack in the consciousness in 2020, realized, oh, it's been easy. And that doesn't mean this can never go away. Like, whoa, it certainly can. Look, there's a lot that went away in like the first 15 days to slow the spread, which we're still kind of in. So at that point, I just following I always do my best to follow my heart. I'm not perfect, but I always do my best to. And my heart was just pushing me in the direction of like, use your voice, use comedy to shine the light on what's trying to take freedom away. It's, the devil masquerades as an angel in disguise, and we need to shine the light on the devil, so to speak, so it doesn't like take away what's beautiful in America. And that it shocked me to, like, when I started doing that, getting some backlash on my videos. The audience had always known me for just doing videos on how to be gluten intolerant and just fun stuff like that. But then seeing some of the backlash, overwhelming support, but some backlash, it just blew my mind. Like, whoa, freedom, I guess, is a politically divided issue in America, where one side is seemingly all about freedom, certainly plenty wrong, corruption on that side as well. Like, let's just be honest. But also then on the left, it's like they're crusading to like freedom's dangerous. It's like, well, I don't know about that. But I just kept following my heart. So there certainly was a bit of a shock in the audience as the trajectory of my work changed. And I'm sure I lost some viewers, and that's certainly okay. Like, this is America. Don't watch me. Don't subscribe to me if you don't want to. Yet it was also a time where my audience never grew faster. And that wasn't the strategy. I actually thought my audience would shrink as I'm like now talking about political stuff and freedom. But it just really taught me like, oh, there's first off, the freedom loving mindset, that's the majority in our country, which is really cool. And as I was just actually taking a deeper step into being true to myself through my work and content and comedy that I put out, I realized like, oh, when you risk being more true to yourself, that exposes the surface area of who you really are to the world. So people who are actually going to resonate with you, more of them can find you. And that's what I found as I allowed the trajectory of my work to change in the, pro-America, pro-freedom direction.
So interesting. And I totally agree with that. I think when you're making art, you want to be authentic. People respond to that. And sometimes, just like you, I'm sure you have, I've seen this. I even saw this recently with Kat Von D, who's the famous makeup artist person that became a Christian, and she put this video of her being baptized, and she said, I got all these hate messages of people saying, you're only doing this trying to get followers. And I started laughing, like, it's like the worst way in the world to get followers is to fake a Christian baptism. I mean, it's just people are just so ignorant. But anyway, so that's a really interesting story, JP. I didn't know that because we don't really know each other. When I first discovered you, it was a breath of fresh air, and at the risk of sounding cheesy, it made me feel understood. Watching your videos, I was like, that's right. That's how we feel. This is because here's the thing about your videos is they're obviously exaggerated, but they're not that exaggerated. It's sort of like The Office. That's why it's so funny. It's this much exaggerated. And as I'm watching it, I'm going, this guy gets it. This is how we feel. Why aren't there more people like this? And where in the world do you get these ideas from, man?
Yeah, I mean, I'll share that, but first, it really does warm my heart, John, hearing you say like, you feel understood watching my videos. When I meet folks after comedy shows or just on the streets, one of the things that warms my heart is when they share just that. And a lot of times it's someone saying something like, hey, during COVID, like, you watching your videos, JP, you don't know how much that meant to me. It made me actually feel sane. It made me feel like I'm not the crazy
I would agree
one.
with that.
I feel understood. And there's nothing special about me. It's just happens that someone watched my videos, like I'm voicing something that is not represented on mainstream media. In fact, some of what I voice, it's heavily censored in social media as well. So there's a suppression for this perspective. But when people hear it, it's just there's a unity that happens with that. Or when I hear so-and-so say something that I'm thinking, but maybe I don't know how to say, or maybe I don't have the courage, it's like, oh man, I feel understood, I feel connected, I feel unity, which is just freaking beautiful. Then there was a question you asked me, John, about 90 seconds ago, and I forgot it because
I like
so
it.
Narcissistic. I needed to tell you what else I was thinking.
or maybe a little ADD. That's good because I do that too. I'm like, what was that question? I was asking, where do you get these ideas from? I was saying they're so much like reality.
Yeah. Nowadays the ideas, it just seems like they write themselves, because you mentioned like exaggeration. Exaggeration, it's one of the principles of comedy. But in our world today, things have gotten so freaking crazy and so ridiculous, so exaggerated. It's like, dude, what's going on is actually comedy. It's exaggerated enough relative to like the normal sane reality that should be what's going on, and that maybe what was happening in the past. So I just observe things, and there's way more out there than what I can possibly make content on. But how I actually select like it's all writing itself, but how do I select what I do comedy on? I see where I'm most emotionally moved. And there's do you know who Carl Jung is, the Swiss psychiatrist?
Yes.
Heard of him? So he died in 1963. Apparently, super wise dude, and people smarter than myself say that, so I am gullible enough to believe it. So Carl Jung he had a thought that I just think is brilliant. He says, "Feelings are the language of the soul." And I think the best creativity, it's not created by the human mind. I think it's received by the human mind and maybe created from our souls or God. So it kind of comes down through this spiritual fiber optic system. And if our mind is still enough and humble enough, then we get to observe it. And sometimes we mistakenly believe, oh, I created that. I think we probably just received it. But looking at Carl Jung's quote, feelings are the language of the soul, I notice when I'm most emotionally moved by something, whether it's anger, happiness, or anything in between, it's like, okay, that's the language of my soul right there. I want to pay attention. What's on the other side of that feeling? What was it about? And what are some nuances there? Where's some contradictions? Where does the light need to be shined? And are there any sort of deceptions in this area? So when I feel emotionally moved, that's typically what kind of tips me off on let's create a video or a stand-up routine around whatever the topic is.
That's interesting. I can relate to that for sure. This is a little bit slightly off subject, but not really, because maybe that's why comedy can be so effective at changing people's minds. Or opening somebody to another perspective. Because I find art in general, comedy is one of those things, though, that, like, for instance, Dave Chappelle. And I'm just going to say this because I'm not telling people to go watch Dave Chappelle. It's filthy. The language is terrible. Okay. But on Dave Chappelle's show years ago, I actually kind of thought this might be the best thing for race relations I've ever seen, because Dave Chappelle would just make fun of everybody, every group of people, every color of skin, everybody. And you're watching it, and all of a sudden you're able to laugh at yourself, you're to laugh at the situation. It changes your mind about something. And I'm just curious. I don't know, this is a silly question, but have you met anybody that was like, actually, JP, you kind of helped change my mind about some of these things?
Yeah, I have. I'm still unable to change my wife's mind about anything. But
Yeah.
for viewers, yeah, man, and that's one of those things that warms my heart. The feedback I'll receive is, a kind of common story I'll hear is, JP, I was believing all the propaganda and I wasn't doing my own thinking. I thought it was my own thinking. And your videos are one of the things that help open my mind and got me thinking more for myself and changing my mind, where it could serve me better. And then also people sharing like, yeah, I've got that crazy relative or my sister's insane, but I send her your videos and there's like, they kind of go in and we can have a conversation from there. And I think why that might be is the language of comedy. It's a language of playfulness. And in our human minds, wise people have always said our human minds, they are not designed to make us happy. They are designed for survival. So part of our survival, both physically and mentally, if we're just run by our survival mechanisms, which a lot of people are, we don't want anything to change, because change, if everything stays the same, we never change our mind. Things are predictable, and that just feels better for survival. But if something changes in our environment or our thoughts, now that's uncertain, that's more the unknown, and that just evokes more of a fear and like a bit of a threat to our primal survival mechanism. But with the language of comedy, the defenses from our mind don't have to come up as much. So like if you tell me something that's counter to what I currently believe, and I'm not in a very good open heart, open mind state, then right away, my ego, it's just going to get defended. I'm going to push against you, push before your information even comes in so I can consider it. We defend. It's like we don't want our mental center of gravity getting thrown off, so we just defend and reject. But the language of comedy, because it doesn't seem as threatening. So I think a lot of times unconsciously people's ego defense mechanisms are just sort of laid down a little bit more. So whatever the message is in the comedy, it can get into someone's psyche, not to brainwash them, but for them to have the opportunity to consider what the message might be. And I think that's also a beautiful thing about the messages in music. You know, music, it doesn't seem threatening, so people tend to relax. And that's, I think, all good art is that, like, there's a higher consciousness, a higher message that is conveyed through the art. Like the medicine, it's kind of like, if you just listen to a doctor preaching at you, cool. We're going to have some defense mechanisms, even if that's information that is really in your best interest. But art, music, comedy, I think that's kind of like the cheese that we wrap the dog's medicine in, so the dog will actually eat it and let it go down rather than just spitting it out.
Let me tell you something I am passionate about, as you know. I want to see people 100% free from pornography. Not a little bit, 100% all the way free. And that is exactly what Covenant Eyes does. All right. They have been doing this for over 20 years. They've helped 1.5 million people get free from pornography addiction, and they are on your side. I have a friend who's a pastor, and I said, hey, do you know about Covenant Eyes? And he said, dude, me and all of my elders have been a part of Covenant Eyes for years. And he swears by it. He's like, this thing is serious, and it has helped lots of people in churches all around the nation. Not just churches, but churches do it, elders do it, families do it, friends do it, all right? Let me tell you, pornography is ripping families apart, and it's something that we have tolerated and we should not have tolerated, and it's something that people thought, well, if I only do a little bit, it's not going to affect me and blah, blah, blah. I personally know people whose marriages have been ripped apart because of this, all right? It is absolutely deadly, but with accountability and with the power of the Spirit, I am telling you, you can break free from this. I got good news. I know people whose marriages have been put back together because they broke free from pornography. So here's what you do. Go to covenanteyes.com, use promo code Cooper. That's my last name, Cooper, of course. Cooper is the promo code. You're going to get a free month trial. That's what it's about. You and a partner. Get a partner to do it. Someone you trust, someone that you love, someone that says, hey, I want to be in this with you and I want to break free of this with you. You can do it. All right. Trust me. Go to covenanteyes.com, promo code Cooper, get your first month free. Yeah, that sounds good. I think that's insightful. I like the cheese metaphor as well. So speaking of cheese, you got a book coming I'm just joking. No, but it's cool. So you got this book, kind of switching gears, but it's on Brave Books, which we are a fan of here at Cooper Stuff. I think is absolutely awesome. And I absolutely want to talk about the book. One of the aspects of the book is this idea of censoring people, or feeling like you have this peer pressure. And one of the things we have in society, I just wanted to mention now, because I know you feel the same way as I do about it, the insane cancel culture, censorship, to try to force people to do something by shutting everybody else up. I don't remember that when I was growing up. I'm just kind of curious, like, am I wrong, or has that sort of changed? We've always had peer pressure, but that new element, isn't that kind of new?
It seems like it to me, John. I think what kids have, and adults for that matter, present day, it's peer pressure 2.0, where we know about cancel culture, and like cancel culture is part of peer pressure. And there's intimidation and there's coercion. So the first part of the 2.0 peer pressure today is intimidation. It's kind of like, hey, if you don't toe the line, if you don't, say what we want you to say or not say that, we're going to cancel you. You were going to ruin you. We're going to hit you with all the smear terms in our playbook. So there is certainly fear-based intimidation from peer pressure. And then there's also the coercion of virtue with peer pressure, where at one angle they're intimidating you, you better fall in line or else. And then the other is baiting with pleasure. The pleasure is like, hey, if you stand with the current thing, you're a good person. You want virtue signaling points, don't you? Good, kind, loving people do this. It's all a tyrannical consciousness. It's intimidation as well as the good cop, bad cop, but they're both dysfunctional, tyrannical cops. And then the other thing with peer pressure present day is, compared to when we were kids, a lot of it is also delivered through social media now. And it's just like, it used to be like, cool, when you're at school or hanging out with your friends, that's when the possibility of peer pressure was there. But now, obviously, kids go home. If they have a phone, they're looking on social media, and there can be all kinds of peer pressure, anything from like, well, I want to fall in line and fit in, to obviously bullying that happens in social media. And in bullying, it's easier for it to happen in social media because you're not physically present. So the idea of, well, there could be physical consequences if you bully me, like that's not there in social media. So it's just like a free rein. And man, I'll tell you, peer pressure, obviously, it's a story as old as time itself. And it's always been something I think we need to reach kids on, because the consequence of succumbing to peer pressure, sometimes there's dangerous consequences for sure, but the pervading consequence that I think is outside of like physical danger, the most heinous consequence is, if you succumb to peer pressure, you are betraying yourself. And there is nothing that hurts self-esteem more than when you betray yourself. Now, if you form a habit of succumbing to peer pressure, you formed a habit of betraying yourself. Now that's the path of least resistance. And good luck having a happy, meaningful life filled with purpose, let alone human connection, if you have these grooved in neural pathways of you just betray yourself. And lastly, before I get off my soapbox here, John, as a little bit of a, call it like a market test of how much peer pressure is there today? And haven't people gotten that message as children? A little bit of a market analysis of that. I look at the past few years, and now I'm just talking about adults, but past few years of adults being obedient, doing as they're told. If it's stay in your home, don't see your family, shut down your business, inject this into your body. What's in it? We don't really know, but inject it anyway. That's all been peer pressure. And when adults do it, we call that obedience. We call that compliance, but it's the exact same template of peer pressure. Now, personally, I don't care what someone believes. I don't care what they do. All I care about is they are the ones choosing what they do. They are the ones using their miraculous mind and the guidance of their heart to choose what to believe or do. That's really all I care about. So in other words, I care about people being true to themselves, doing their own thinking, because when you're doing that, you're not succumbing to peer pressure. Therefore, you're not building self-esteem that's built off of self-betrayal, which is really crappy self-esteem. And we know we have tremendous mental health issues out there. People really suffer with poor self-worth, poor self-esteem. So getting people to be true to themselves, seeing peer pressure and understanding it's okay to have the courage to resist it in the name of being true to my own thinking and following my heart. It's uncomfortable, yet I do believe we need to really teach kids and adults that, as uncomfortable as it is, the uncomfortable things in life are always the best things for us. They make us into stronger people. So kids need to see this exemplified in how we live, as well as children's books, children's stories, children's content, because past few years, I think we've virtualized obedience. In other words, we've taught kids, yeah, this peer pressure thing, do it.
I think that's really insightful, JP. I've not really I don't think I've quite thought of cancel culture and peer pressure exactly together like that, but it's really interesting because when we were growing up, peer pressure was always like, don't be pressured to do these things that are bad for you. So don't be pressured to do drugs. Just say no to drugs. Don't be pressured to smoke cigarettes. Don't be peer pressure to have sex just to fit in. And it was so, I know we don't know each other well, but I'm a Christian, right? So then it was the Christians or the goody, they called us goody goodies because we didn't do this stuff. We weren't peer pressured. Now a new religion of social justice has come in, displaced Christianity, and now the peer pressure is to obey the religion. And it's sort of like it's a new religion, but it's an inverse of the peer pressure than what we used to have. Now the peer pressure is obey or there will be consequences. That is a really insightful take on it.
I mean, just borrowing an example from the music industry, just, because your point is so spot on. You look at Rage Against the Machine, whatever it was, the 90s, like they were, kind of sort of in a way preaching rebelliousness, the opposite of peer pressure, like don't fit in, like don't do as you're told, like, yeah, be yourself. And now, that same band, they're doing posts like, you better comply or else. It's like, wow, that is, we're living in bizarro land. Like, what is,
yeah,
what has happened here?
A few years ago, I think it was in 2020, it might have been in 2020, I was doing an interview and I got in a lot of trouble because somebody had asked me again about the Rage Against the Machine thing, because Skillet was the first band, maybe one of the only bands that ever, my band, that came out and said, we're not doing vaccine mandated shows, absolutely not doing it. And we were getting really slammed by the industry. Somebody asked me against Rage Against the Machine. I said, this is bizarro world. So me, the Christian rocker, I'm the revolutionary now. And Rage Against the Machine is the machine. Like Rage is the machine now. This is insane to me. But everything's just been flipped on its head. So it's a really great point you're making. And I promise you want to talk more about the book, but you got me thinking now. And I think this is an interesting point. What you were just describing is kind of a libertarian position that you hold in this, that you're not telling somebody they cannot get a vaccine, or you're not telling somebody they cannot do wear the mask or live the life they want to live. You're saying, hey, it's more of a live and let live position. Are you as surprised as I am to find out that a lot of our friends who are Democrats are not into that, when I always thought that was the Democrats that were more into the live and let live position, and it was the conservatives that were like, you do this and you do this and you do this, and now it's kind of flipped. Are you surprised about that?
Yeah. I mean, once again, that's another reason why we're living in this bizarro land, or now the Democrats. And to be fair, I don't think it's a Democratic position. I don't think it's a liberal position. I think it's a radical leftist communist position that is now infiltrated the Democrat Party. So we take something that's inherently good, but it's got poison in it. And that poison masquerades as the food itself, because, when communism comes into a country, they know the best way to do a, communist infiltration. It's not to raise their hand. It's like, hey guys, we're doing communism here. Here's what communism. No, they disguise it under democratic principles, but still, it is surprising seeing how many people have gone along with it. I think the term mass formation psychosis has really heavily been put on the map now, and that makes the things that don't make any sense, kind of makes them make sense, how they could happen. And as we're living in this bizarro land, and obedience is a thing, but it's like peer pressure is a thing, but now it's inverse. Like we're being taught you need to succumb to peer pressure, obey. Human nature, we're obedient beings. And I personally think it is really good for us to be obedient. But the question is, who are you being obedient to? Now, if you have faith in God and a connection to God, that's who you want to obey. Our lives are nothing but better when we obey God. And especially like when we can like notice our own thinking, our own wants, our own egotistical nature, and we see what we want. But if we can receive what God's asking of us, what God wants, and we can put our wants aside in order to, the word's weird, but be more obedient to God, our lives are better. We kind of get ourselves out of our own way. And we all need something to worship. And we know like false idols isn't the best thing to worship. So we're statistically, people in America are more godless than ever. And, statistically, the Democrat Party, I think from 50 years ago, it was statistically like 92% of Democrats believed in God. Now it's down to 63 or 67%. So it's a massive drop. Conservatives still have a massive faith in God, which is just interesting intel. So if we all need something to worship and we're not worshiping God, whether we're choosing to or not, at some level, we're creating false idols. We're worshiping the news and being obedient to that, worshiping Fauci, being obedient to him, or Bill Gates, or the World Economic Forum, all really piss poor substitutes for God. And that's why I think we could identify probably 1 million problems in America. And I think all of them have one common denominator, and that is people being disconnected from God. If we just learn to lean in with a little more faith, open our ears, our hearts, praying, and having the courage to act on God's guidance, so many of our problems, I think, just magically disappear because we need to be obedient. The question is, who are we going to be obedient to? If it's not God, then that is an obedience that may not be in your best interest.
Absolutely. Amen. I agree with that. All right. We need to talk about your book before I run out of time. And I keep promising you we're going to do it. So let's jump into it. Like I said, Brave Books, awesome. People need to check out what they're doing. It's good because it's not just complaining about culture. It's actually doing something about the culture that's going to help raise a new generation. So I love it. So yours is called Chomp Chomp Chomp. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so the book is, entertaining children's book through story and amazing illustrations. I didn't do the illustrations, so I'm not bragging, but they're amazingly illustrated. It's a book about peer pressure, and it takes place in the landscape of social media. It just makes it more relatable to kids today. And along the adventure of the story, the message that's ultimately embedded in it is the number one message that I wish to teach my son. It's like, if I could only teach him one thing as his father in order to set him up for having happiness and a good life now and into the future with meaning, purpose, the message would be this: do your own thinking, be in touch with your heart, and have the courage to follow through on it. And that's ultimately what I wanted to put in the book, because I was like, yeah, that's so important for me to teach my son, but I also wanted to help get that message out to families all over the country and all over the world, because it's a message that unfortunately is very needed right now. And given the children's entertainment landscape, I think there's not only a shortage of good messages, positive messages, there's unfortunately an overabundance of corrupt messages with dangerous ideologies that it's not even neutral. It's like, here's children's entertainment, taking them in a worse direction. So I know we need to protect kids from those, but we also need to provide positive alternatives. And anyway, Chomp 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 is just one man's small contribution to wanting more of a force of good in the lives of children and families.
I love it. It's so absolutely important. I think it's the most important thing we can do is to begin to invest in these kids, the next generation, because as you said, it's not like children's books these days are neutral. They're just, stories. They're not like that. A lot of them are just flat out perverse. The interesting thing, as you just said, the importance of this message is that the world these kids are growing up in, the peer pressure you're talking about is that if they don't, they're being told they're bad people. And I think I want to focus on that one more time, because that's different than when we were kids. We were maybe saying no to peer pressure. There were things that would maybe harm us, but they felt good, or they were fun, or they were rebellious. Man, if you're a kid growing up now and you don't conform to what they're telling you to obey to, they're called a bad person. So you've got to have courage.
Yeah. 100%. I think we're functioning on a courage deficiency in our country, and I've got hope. I see there's major strides that have been taken in replacing cowardice with courage, obedience with bravery. And I remember back when I was a kid, and maybe you can too, John, when I did something courageous, whether it was like, hey, I'm going off the high dive for the first time. Like, I've been scared for months, but I'm doing it today. Or it's like, dude, okay, tackle football. Now I'm doing that. That looks scary, but I'm doing it. When I did something courageous as a kid, man, nothing could touch that. It just felt so good. And that's like feeling good off of good psychological nutrition. It's not like a short-term feeling good because I've got a big dopamine hit because I'm just scrolling Instagram or watching weird stuff. It's like, no, kids, when they taste it, they start to understand, like, whoa, okay, courage, it might feel uncomfortable in the moment. And then, the discomfort of, well, if I'm standing up for what I believe is right and nobody else is, feel like I don't belong. Yeah, that's super uncomfortable. But also when you do it, man, as a kid, as an adult, nothing feels better than having courage. It's a superpower. It's kind of like the healthy drug of choice, I think.
Yeah. And we are in short supply of it these days. It's just absolutely crazy. So where can people get the book, and where can people follow you at?
Yeah, if you want to check out Chomp Chomp Chomp, the children's book, I would be honored. You can grab it at bravebooks.com. And for all my other stuff, my videos, my touring, just all the things, you can find all that on my website, awakenwithjp.com.
Yeah, I'm sure tons of people have already seen those videos, but let's just say that somebody hasn't. Let's say they're like, I don't know who this is. What is your personal favorite video that you've made? Can you choose one?
Well, I'll give you two of them. And, I'm such a narcissist. It's like, well, John, all my videos are pretty good.
I celebrate your entire collection.
There's two I'll give you. One, you can search on YouTube or wherever. It's called Why Life Jackets Should Be Mandated. And I was using life jackets as a metaphor to say what I wanted to say while dancing through the raindrops of censorship about the jabs, the mandates, the coercion that was surrounding that. So why life jackets should be mandatory. And then the second one, you can type in the best female swimmer in the world. And there's a video.
I've seen it.
Yeah. And to me, by the way, I do have to say, some people, they'll have a little bit of a misperception, like, oh, JP, you're making fun of a man who thinks he's a woman on the women's swim team. Like, that's mean to make fun of them. And I would agree. And the intention actually isn't to make fun of that. The intention is to shine the light on how we are being encouraged to ignore objective truth, ignore biological reality, and of course, baiting kids with virtue into like, hey, if you don't feel good about yourself, think about these hormone blockers. So it's meant to shine the light of on how truth is being corroded if we allow it to. And ultimately, I think truth that comes from God. So when we're seeing truth try to be destroyed, censored, we see this 1984 stuff like, okay, that the best female swimmer in the world is definitely a guy. That's interesting. What we're really seeing is, I believe, in an attempt to disconnect people from God. When you're destroying truth, you're destroying people's connection to God. And that's what videos like that are meant to call out.
I love it. Yeah. We need courage to stand against the storm. I love it, man. It's been so cool talking to you and just having a good laugh on this episode. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for joining the show.
Again, John, thank you for having me on. One, it's an honor, and also just getting to know you just through our vibes here. You're a gem, brother. So I'm glad you're walking the earth. Glad you're doing the work that you're doing. I know you're helping just lift people up. That's amazing. I can't wait to check out your new book. I just ordered it. So man, thank you for all that you're doing, brother.
Well, that's very kind. I appreciate it. All right. We'll connect hopefully on the road, and keep up the good work, and we'll be watching your videos.
Read the Bible.